10 hours before he died, Michael Jackson asked his doctor for a medicine to help him sleep. And after the doctor gave him a small dose of a sedative, it didn't work, and he stayed awake until 2 a.m. Then he asked for something stronger, and the doctor, who was being paid to stay with him 24 hours a day, connected the monitoring equipment and gave him a heavier drug.
Today we're looking at the internet's most chilling, unexplained moments. Welcome back, family. Thank you to all the channel members for support. If you're seeing this right now, remember to like it, subscribe. We're trying to get to that 100K mark. Hype the video up so it gets pushed to more people. This one gets kind of crazy, so make sure to watch till the end. Let's go.
What?
Sometimes I do be thinking to myself, like, I wonder if they're just trying to spread an agenda. Either that or something's in the water.
Morbid Facts, Part 743. At the height of his YouTube and FaZe Clan fame, Norden Chat, aka FaZe Rain, spiraled into a drug addiction so destructive that millions of fans watched him unravel in real time. What began with casually showing off painkillers to his audience escalated to him swallowing alarming amounts of pills on stream, bragging about it while his body silently deteriorated. By 2020, Rain was suffering seizures, collapsing, and eventually lost the ability to walk. Doctors warned the nerve damage in his legs might be permanent, leaving him in a wheelchair and forcing him into grueling therapy. His addiction wrecked friendships, destroyed his career, and turned a gaming star into a cautionary tale as fans saw him posting from hospital beds and fighting through constant pain. But after years of setbacks and near-death lows, he finally clawed his way back to sobriety. Rain can now walk again, is slowly attempting to rebuild his career, and now shares his harrowing story as a warning about how fast addiction can take everything.
Dude, I remember watching this dude every single day when I was like 13 years old, so it was kind of crazy to see him take that path. But you know what I'm saying, it's always good to see people come out of situations like that.
I found Donald Trump in London from centuries ago. So this church has an image of Donald Trump on it. It's from the 15th century. The parts of the church is called St. Bartholomew's, and it's part of the famous hospital of St. Bartholomew, founded in 1123. But if you go around the corner to the garden here and look up at some of the images on the roof, you will see a certain American president. So, no, that's not Donald Trump here, nor is this one as well. But if you go here and look up at this gentleman here, look really closely, it can be no other than the Donald himself. And yet this is some 250 years old. How did they know? And yet there's another Donald Trump reference in the City of London as well. Watch this. Now, I don't believe in conspiracy theories at all, nor in time travel or anything like that. I'm in the City of London and I'm looking towards Trump Street. And the bizarre thing, which you notice if you walk along Trump Street to the end of the street, as I said, no conspiracies at all. I'm not that sort of person. But look at the street that's right next to it. If you follow Trump, then the trail leads you all the way to Russia.
Me personally, I've never went under anesthesia, but anyone that's ever went under anesthesia, let me know what you went through. Because I've seen some people say they felt like it was the best sleep of their life, and I've seen some people say like they wake up completely like sick and just in pain.
They would take a stray dog from the streets and train her to remain calm in a tiny capsule while handling the intense shaking and noise of a rocket launch. Once she was ready, she was strapped to a rocket and sent away to space to become the first living creature to circle the Earth. But as the world celebrated her achievement, some people back home were not so excited. You see, the engineers in charge of the mission only had less than 4 weeks to design and build the spacecraft. So by the time of the launch, they still hadn't figured out a way to bring her back down. They just launched her knowing they were never gonna see her again, since all they wanted to test was whether life could survive in space or not.
Morbid Facts, Part 649. Coach Tyler Wall was a 38-year-old fitness mentor who played a central role in Mr. Beast's recent video, Lose 100 Pounds, Win $250,000, where he trained contestant Maj in a grueling months-long weight loss journey. Tyler provided constant support physically and emotionally as Maj fought to shed over 100 pounds. But tragically, midway through filming, Coach Wall was found dead in his Greenville, North Carolina apartment on February 18, 2025. His death was described as sudden and unexpected, with no official cause publicly disclosed. Completely devastated, the Mr. Beast team gave Maj the choice to stop the challenge, but he chose to continue in honor of his late coach. Maj ultimately completed the drastic transformation, dropping from 324 pounds to 222, achieving the goal he and his coach set out to reach together. Despite initial hesitation, the Mr. Beast team chose to release the video with a tribute honoring Tyler's impact, ending with the words, "In loving memory of Coach Tyler Wall."
Yeah, I remember watching that Mr. Beast video. That was actually a really good video. If you guys haven't seen it, I'm gonna try to tag it like right here.
George Washington was fighting for his life because his throat had been terribly infected. You see, he was riding horses in the freezing rain, and his throat was ravaged with bacteria that was lethal at the time. In 1799, there were no antibiotics. So instead, doctors cut open his arm. They drained over 80 ounces of blood from his body, more than a 2-liter soda. But this weakened the president until he gasped his final words, "'Tis well."
If you didn't know, shoving dead people inside of cryogenic chambers with the hopes that 100 years in the future we'll figure out how to unthaw them and bring them back to life is a complete scam. I promise you, throughout the next couple decades, we'll be seeing billions of dollars worth of lawsuits because of this. How can I be so certain? Because my man, they're dead. If I took a nice juicy T-bone steak and then put it in the freezer for a century, there's no possible way to turn it back into a cow. The cow was gone the second you turned it into a steak, regardless if you froze it or not. Maybe you're asking, how is there gonna be lawsuits over this? If they're dead anyways, what's the matter if they're in the ground or in a cryo chamber? These things cost $250,000 up front. And then just to run them and keep them below -100 degrees, it costs $1,200 monthly. If the family or friends of the loved one who's in these cryo chambers doesn't pay, they just will shut it off. And now that friends and family have a double grieving process. Dead people in cryo chambers is just a cash grab to steal from grieving people.
Since my Hiroshima video sparked a lot of debate, I think it's only fair that we take a look at some of the most horrific things Japan did during World War II, each one darker than the last. Before the atomic bombings, Japan had planned for a horrific biological attack on California. Submarines would launch planes to drop fleas infected with bubonic plague over San Diego, hoping to trigger mass death and chaos across the US. Scheduled for September 1945, it was only halted when Japan surrendered weeks earlier, narrowly preventing one of history's deadliest biological attacks. During the war, Japan's military forced tens of thousands of women, many as young as teenagers, into sexual slavery. Known as comfort women, they were trapped in military brothels, raped by dozens of soldiers each day, and often left broken by disease, pregnancy, or suicide. Survivors who later spoke out described it as a daily death they were forced to endure for years. When Japanese troops invaded Nanjing in 1937, the city descended into 6 weeks of unrestrained horror. Hundreds of thousands of civilians and prisoners of war were executed, often by machine guns, bayonets, or mass burnings. Up to 80,000 women were systematically raped, sometimes murdered immediately after, and sometimes mutilated as a warning to others. Eyewitnesses described rivers flooded with corpses and roads so littered with bodies that walking became impossible without stepping on the dead. And perhaps the most horrific of all, Japan's Secret Unit 731 in Manchuria carried out some of the most sadistic experiments in history, using men, women, and even children as disposable test subjects. Some prisoners were deliberately infected with painfully deadly viruses, then dissected alive without anesthesia so doctors could study how the diseases destroyed living organs in real time. Others were tied to stakes while grenades or flamethrowers were tested on them, or left outside in sub-zero cold until their flesh blackened with frostbite, before doctors hacked off limbs one by one to see how long they could survive. Some had their arms amputated and reattached to the other side of their body, while others had their entire skin slowly peeled off to see how long it would take them to die. In all, tens of thousands of people were killed through torture disguised as science, and not a single test subject ever made it out alive. Perhaps most shocking of all, many of the doctors who oversaw these experiments walked free after the war, trading their horrific research to America in exchange for immunity.
Do you know that this drug lets you hear other people's thoughts? They call it Echo. One pill, and suddenly you know everyone's secrets, their fears, their lies, their darkest desires. For a moment, it feels like power, but the whispers don't stop. Even when you're alone, voices claw inside your head, growing louder each day. Some aren't even human. Some speak in dead languages no one understands. And the worst part? Keep taking Echo long enough, and one voice rises above the rest. A voice that doesn't belong to anyone alive. A voice that commands. And once you listen, your mind is no longer yours.
Yo, if you gotta take a drug to think that you can hear people's thoughts, I don't think you're hearing people's thoughts, buddy.
Here's one of the ultimate beauty care methods in the Victorian era. Women in the Victorian era were also interested in losing weight, but instead of relying on traditional workout methods like cardio, they turned to something much simpler: swallowing an egg that came from a tapeworm, which is a type of parasite. And once the tapeworm hatched in patient's intestine, it fed on any nutrients supplied to the patient's body, eventually growing up to whopping 15 to 30 feet. And despite the chance that patient's heart or brain might get infected by the worm, women simply didn't care that much because it actually helped them lose weight. And once that's achieved, the only problem left was getting the tapeworm out of the body. First, a doctor made the patient starve for a good amount of time along with the tapeworm, and lure the worm out through her mouth with the smell of food. Second, the patient was placed in water heated to body temperature so the worm could crawl out through the other end. Lastly, instead of waiting for it to come out, the doctor made the patient swallow a luring device to catch the worm inside. However, since shoving a metal object down the throat is of course extremely dangerous, and no one knew how long it would take for the tapeworm to take the bait, the patient's chance of choking to death was pretty high.
He invented special glasses to help his daughter, who was going blind, according to the legend. But when she put them on, she saw that the earth was inside the stomach of an enormous creature. This creature controlled humanity's minds, so we wouldn't realize we were being eaten. But the vision was so terrifying that she took off the glasses and pulled out her own eyes with her bare hands. Her father burned the designs and mysteriously disappeared, and the glasses were never seen again.
February 13th, 2017. At around 9 a.m., a man arrived at Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia. While waiting for the departure of his flight, he was walking through an area of the airport. To his surprise, two young women approached him from different directions. One grabbed him from behind and put her hand on his face, brushing the action off as a prank, then leaving the scene. The man felt suspicious that this was just a prank, so he reported the incident to the airport employees. Minutes later, he started to feel rather sick. His body was sweating furiously. His chest felt tighter as breathing got harder. Medics at the airport came to check and treat his issue, but eventually he needed to be transferred to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, he unfortunately passed away inside the ambulance. The name that he gave them was Kim Chol, but later it was revealed that this man's real identity is Kim Jong-nam, the older half-brother of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. This means one thing: it was not an innocent prank, but an assassination.
Yo, I genuinely wonder what they gave him.
10 hours before he died, Michael Jackson asked his doctor for a medicine to help him sleep. And after the doctor gave him a small dose of a sedative, it didn't work, and he stayed awake until 2 a.m. Then he asked for something stronger, and the doctor, who was being paid to stay with him 24 hours a day, connected the monitoring equipment and gave him a heavier drug. The problem was that Michael Jackson had never slept well since childhood, and because he used to go 2 or 3 days completely awake, he had been taking increasingly stronger drugs to be able to fall asleep. But that day, he had already been awake for 8 hours straight, which made him ask for a drug so strong that it was only supposed to be used inside a hospital. At that moment, the doctor picked up the syringe and injected the drug into him, finally making him sleep. The problem was that after 30 minutes, he stopped breathing, and the doctor immediately tried to revive him, spending 40 minutes trying alone without any equipment. After that time, he realized it was impossible and decided to call an ambulance, but they couldn't save Michael's life, and the doctor was arrested.
In the 1930s, during one execution, the prisoner wasn't positioned properly. The blade missed the neck and hit the shoulder. The man was still alive, screaming. The executioner had to reposition the body while it bled and drop the blade again. Even hardened officials turned pale that day. In Marseille, one guillotine was so poorly maintained that the blade became dull. During one execution, the blade dropped and bounced off the prisoner's neck. Blood sprayed. The man screamed. They raised the blade and tried again. The second time, another failed cut. Only after a third drop did the head finally come off. The crowd, horrified.
A Soviet soldier took a secret document and used it as toilet paper in 1941. Then he threw it into the trash bin where British spies discovered and cleaned it hours later. He did this because the British intentionally delayed the paper supply, and the Soviets were forced to use anything they had on hand. And because they didn't expect the British to be raiding all their trash bins, the spies recovered tank blueprints, troop locations, and even Soviet battle plans. A bear broke free from his handler and sprinted toward a wounded soldier on the battlefield, but instead of tearing him apart, the bear picked him up and carried him back to safety. You see, this bear had traveled with Polish soldiers for over a year, carrying ammunition, and when he saw his wounded friend in the middle of battle, he acted like a nurse and brought him back. The bear was later awarded several medals and sent to a zoo, where his friend visited him often. This is a knife pistol, the most loved weapon among CIA spies. It looks like an ordinary knife, but it has a single bullet chamber hidden inside the handle. So in a moment of danger, it can fire a deadly shot,
surprising the target in a close combat.
The most common surgery of the Middle Ages was amputation, and it was done without anesthesia. Imagine being tied down in a crowded market while a barber sawed off your infected limb with a dull, rusty blade. There were no hospitals, no sterile rooms, just pain, panic, and blood. The patient was restrained by several men, screaming as the barber surgeon worked quickly to avoid death by blood loss. The only anesthesia was a gulp of strong alcohol or a blow to the head to make the victim faint. Their tools were crude, razors, pliers, and even kitchen knives. Once the limb was cut off, the wound was sealed by pressing red-hot iron directly onto the flesh. Many patients didn't survive, dying from shock, infections, or massive bleeding. Follow for more dark and shocking history.
What a wild twist. So the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, Maria Machado, she just dedicated that prize to none other than Donald Trump. I'm not even kidding. So she just tweeted saying that now more than ever, we count on President Trump, the people of the United States, Latin America, and the Democratic allies to achieve freedom and democracy. Then, quote, I dedicate this prize to the suffering people of Venezuela and to President Trump for his decisive support of our cause.
How English sounds to non-English speakers. What you will hear now is just an audio that simulates the phonetics of English, so there are no real words or sentences that make sense.
Flarneth glorv slent wibish provins tho ogol glod harnish gledem shanter bluk vrendel swarth keys dowlip bloxen trolley flibish kroons wither nog sharnip kredel stribly fen tulling broave fleb clintul grebish yarp flunder stroes gleed then dow jimish blort crinkly shaven wibble sward British glomp turv leto cranks blidhorpen drebish chind flarn thimble scrove nefer glarnish gibble thrandish steward glef venlop clindle brand. She ever moffling ride thrigish pladdle stee landel. Bluk shorp grempish blarv wiffle krendel froave shindle prat robish flem door trindle fleck glarv bliggle shord drindle vlent garmish breastindle thromish glef warren beffer flub clending jormish strack flemish vorn glef shottle tharmish crud swindle dribble fret flaxen gledish where brendish florn geep clindle grobble shart drindle bleavish flare vrantle miffle blart waddle stobbish gren fliggle treftish sharn vortle grieve slib crindle grobble farn brovish stend gleet jandish miffle blart thernal grom shan trindle scriddle flarn glimble shefish morv wendish crumple Snapple Snet Bladish Flarn Greep your.
That sounds like a witch was casting like a spell in the most American accent.
Donald Trump just had one of the busiest days of his life. In the morning, he flew from Washington to Israel, where he then immediately addressed their parliament and was called
the greatest friend that the state of Israel has ever had in the White House.
He was then interrupted by an MP who was shouting about Gaza genocide, but then was quickly rushed out of the room.
That was very efficient.
After all of this, he then got back on the plane and flew to Egypt for the final signing of the ceasefire deal, officially concluding the war after 2 years.
The war is over. War is over. The war is over, okay? Do you understand that?
He also invited more than 20 world leaders, some of which Trump said only had 20 minutes notice to come, but still dropped everything to arrive. In fact, he originally invited Netanyahu to also attend, but later had to uninvite him after the Turkish president said that he would not land his plane in Egypt if Bibi was there as well. He had yet another insane handshake with French President Macron, so the saga continues. But one of the longest handshakes he had with world leaders was with the Palestinian Authority president. He had a bit of an awkward moment with Keir Starmer.
United Kingdom. Where's the United Kingdom? Where's Russia? Come here. Is everything going good? Very good. That's very nice of you here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice. And I think it's fantastic. And we have so many others, and just so many others. And
he called Canada's Prime Minister a president, and then said he's lucky that he didn't call him a governor.
I'm glad you upgraded me to president. That's good. I started.
He called Italy's Prime Minister beautiful.
She's a beautiful young woman. Where is she? There she is. You don't mind being called beautiful, right? Because you are. Thank you very much.
And then kind of rounded it out by saying that he didn't like some of the world leaders attending, but
you'll never find out who they are. Well, maybe you will, come to think of it.
Now, after the deal was officially signed, even some of Trump's political opponents gave him credit, including Biden, Bill Clinton, and even shockingly, Hillary. Egypt awarded Trump with the Order of the Nile, which is the country's highest state honor. Jimmy Carter was the only other US president to receive it. Time magazine praised Trump, calling him a hero, and Trump responded by saying it was a great article, but they used the worst picture of all time. Trump concluded by saying that there is not going to be World War III, and suggested that there will be peace in the Middle East. So the big question is, do you believe him, or is this situation still far from over?
My honest opinion is I feel like there probably is a catch, like something probably he traded or something that he did to completely stop the war. But I was telling one of my friends this theory that I had, because, you know, Trump always talks about having a third term. I feel like towards the end of his term, I might like literally clip this just in case it happens. Towards the end of his term, I feel like he might start a war. Because I don't know if you guys know, but back in the day, I think it was either FDR or Theodore Roosevelt. One of the Roosevelts. I think it was either World War I or World War II. There was a world war going on, and then they served an extra term just because there was the war going on. So I don't know if Trump can do that now, because I think that was like martial law back in the day. I don't know if Trump can do that now, but don't be surprised if he tries it.
They have an inflatable air mattress that they can inflate and deflate whenever they need it. And that provides a better illusion for you, the viewer. Because once the wrestler lands and he's safely on the ground and your attention is somewhere else, they can deflate the bag and the announce table appears to be touching the floor. Next, we're going to talk about another extreme item, barbed wire. And like the thumbtacks, this barbed wire is 100% real. But unlike the thumbtacks, there is a bit of a trick to this, and I'm going to show you. And again, I stress, do not attempt any of this at home. Barbed wire, it's a tough material to handle, and I promise you, it will spring up and catch you if you're not careful. Just let me be the idiot. Okay, here's the secret. Now, barbed wire is a material, a very tough material, that's designed with these barbs to keep cattle in a certain location, so you know from the jump. It's a sturdy, tough material that's designed to withstand the elements.
You really aren't ready for this one. Now, this story starts with this guy. His name's James, and James is 55, living in Colorado. Here's the thing about James. I guess bro really likes to smash. Because he has a wife, this woman, Suzanne, but James and Suzanne are also both in a long-term relationship with this guy, O'Neill. And so I guess they all smashed together. I don't know how that works, but they're all three together. They're a throuple, and they all three live together. And one night in 2023, the three of them are at their condo. And they are apparently partying a bit hard. Like there's a bit of cocaine, a bit of meth, and they're just, they're having a good time. And afterwards, O'Neill lays down to go to sleep, and unfortunately, he doesn't wake up. And so the next morning, Suzanne wakes up in her bed and she looks over to the floor where O'Neill's air mattress is, because he sleeps on an air mattress next to their bed. And Suzanne sees O'Neill and she's like, oh shit, I think O'Neill's dead. And James looks over and he's like, yep. And so they check his pulse and James tries to perform CPR on him, but no luck. O'Neill is definitely no longer alive, and it seems like he may have partied a little too hard and, OD'd. So now James is like, let's call police. But Suzanne is like, nah, because she isn't ready to give him up. And so that's what they do. They just leave O'Neill's body there in the condo, right there on the air mattress next to their bed. Now, around this time, I guess one of O'Neill's Social Security checks comes in the mail because, he's getting Social Security. And James and Suzanne are like, oh shit, O'Neill's money. And they realize that no one knows O'Neill is dead. And as long as no one knows that, his Social Security checks will keep coming in. And since he doesn't really need that money anymore because he's no longer living, maybe they could just, keep it for themselves. And to make it worse, they also have the PIN number to his debit card. So they can just deposit these checks into his account and boom, they can spend all his money. So both James and Suzanne start using O'Neill's debit card to fund their life. Suzanne starts buying things she needs online from like a beauty supply store. They also pay off their cable internet bill and their insurance bill. James is buying a bunch of shit he wants as well. He even spends it on like random stuff at like 7-Eleven. And about a week goes by, and O'Neill is still laying there on their air mattress in their room. And I would assume at this point it would like start to smell or something, but I guess James and Suzanne don't mind. But here's who does mind. James and Suzanne's chihuahuas. They actually have 8 chihuahuas. And at some point, at least one or some of them start sniffing around O'Neill's body. And they start chewing on him and I guess eating him? And one day, James and Suzanne hear the dogs in the bedroom chewing on this body. And so they go there and they're like, oh shit, the dogs are eating O'Neill. But I guess they're not worried enough to bury O'Neill. Instead, Suzanne decides to just throw the deflated air mattress over him to keep the dogs off. Because, the dogs can't chew through the mattress. And that apparently works because from here, the dogs stop trying to eat O'Neill. Oh, and it gets worse because James and Suzanne keep this whole thing going. They don't report O'Neill dead or missing or anything. And they keep spending his Social Security checks. And 18 months go by. That is a year and a half. A year and a half, and O'Neill's body is still just laying there on the floor in the bedroom underneath the deflated air mattress. Who the hell knows how bad it smells at this point? And not only that, by this point, they've stolen more than $17,000 out of O'Neill's bank accounts. And that is when this guy comes in. We'll just call him Brother, because he's O'Neill's estranged brother. Well, Brother wants to get a hold of O'Neill, but he can't get through, no matter how many times he tries. And of course, Brother doesn't know that O'Neill has passed away. He's just not sure what's going on. Anyways, after no luck getting through, he eventually reaches out to the police for help, and he asks them to do a welfare check on his brother O'Neill. And so police, they go to the address where they think O'Neill could be staying, which is James and Suzanne's condo, and they knock on the door, and James answers. And James is like, hey! But in his mind, he's probably like, oh, fuck! And so police, they ask him what his name is. And James is like, I'm James. Here's the thing, though. O'Neill's name is also James. James O'Neill. And so police now believe that they are talking to O'Neill. And James knows this, but he's just going to keep letting them believe it. And so police are like, cool, your family's worried about you. So what's up with that? And James, pretending to be O'Neill, is like, well, tell my brother I don't want to see him, and I want to be left in peace. And the police are like, all right. And so police go back to Brother and they tell him O'Neill is fine and he doesn't want you to contact him anymore. But then they show Brother the body cam footage of their interaction with who they believe Neil is. And Brother watches it and he's like, that's not my brother. So police, they go back to James's condo and they question him and Suzanne. And James and Suzanne admit that they do actually know O'Neill, but they each give very conflicting stories on where he might be. So police are like, yeah, this is suspicious. And so they file a missing persons report for O'Neill, but they can't prove James and Suzanne have done anything wrong. But Brother, he's not going to give up. He knows these two weirdos know something about O'Neill's disappearance. And so Brother comes up with a plan to try and trick James and Suzanne into admitting that they know where O'Neill is. So he calls Suzanne and he's like, hi, I really need to talk to O'Neill because he's got some inheritance and I want to give him his share. And Suzanne is like, inheritance? Say less. Because, she's probably thinking that if O'Neill gets an inheritance, that she and James will get access to it. So Suzanne tells Brother that O'Neill is here. He's sitting right next to me, but he doesn't want to talk to you. So then Brother says he needs O'Neill's social security number and his bank account info so that he can deposit the inheritance into his account. So Suzanne gives it to him. And Brother says, cool, one more thing. O'Neill is gonna have to sign for his inheritance at the bank in person. And that is when Suzanne just gives up and she stops talking to him. So that plan didn't work. But now Brother has something to work with. So, using the information Suzanne gave him, he starts digging into O'Neill's bank accounts. And he sees that not only are O'Neill's social security checks hitting his bank account every month, but there's also a lot of spending activity going on and a ton of ATM withdrawals. And so Brother, he takes this to police, and they start investigating. And they are able to track O'Neill's debit card to a local 7-Eleven where James had been using it. And when they look at the surveillance footage from that day and time, they see James, not O'Neill, using O'Neill's card. Here's an actual surveillance image of James entering the store. And so police, they get a warrant and they go back to the condo and Suzanne meets them outside. And police tell her that they're going in. And Suzanne doesn't even hesitate. She's just like, yeah, O'Neill's in the bedroom and he's dead under the air mattress. And so, bam, the police arrest James. Here's his mugshot. Also, bam, they arrest Suzanne. Here's her mugshot. And they actually haven't been to trial yet, so all of this is obviously alleged, even though they have admitted to doing most of it.
Yo, this dude's story is always just super crazy. And it makes you think, like, people really have, like, the heart to do stuff like that. Because they knew the dude. It was pretty much one of their friends. And then he was dead and they didn't call nobody. They just stole his money and left him. That's messed up, man. That's messed up.
Thank you all for watching.